Here, the house that waited for someone to return. Part 1. On a cold October evening, the rain fell in thin silver lines across the empty highway as Daniel Harper drove toward a town he had not seen in almost 20 years. The road looked smaller than he remembered, surrounded by endless forests where the trees leaned together as if they were whispering secrets that no outsider was meant to hear. His phone had lost signal nearly 30 miles back. The radio played nothing except static, and the only sound inside the car was the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers. Daniel had promised himself he would never return to Blackridge. Yet there he was. 3 days earlier, a lawyer had called with unexpected news. Daniel's Aunt Eleanor had passed away peacefully at the age of 86. She had left everything she owned, including the old family house, to him. It was strange because they had barely spoken in years. The last letter she had written ended with a single sentence that Daniel never forgot. Some doors should remain closed until they choose to open themselves. He had laughed at the time, assuming old age had filled her mind with strange ideas. But now, as he drove deeper into the forest, those words echoed louder than the rain. A weathered wooden sign finally appeared beside the road. Welcome to Blackridge. Population, 612. The paint was peeling. Someone had scratched strange marks into the wood. Daniel slowed the car and stared for a moment before continuing. The town looked frozen in another decade. Small brick buildings lined the main street. A grocery store with faded windows. An old diner where only one table was occupied. A church with a tall white steeple rising above the rooftops. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. People watched him as he drove past. Not with curiosity, with recognition. As though they had been expecting him. Daniel parked outside the diner, hoping for directions to the house. The bell above the door rang softly as he stepped inside. Every conversation stopped. Forks rested halfway to mouths. Coffee cups paused in midair. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Then an elderly waitress forced a polite smile. "You made it," she said quietly. Daniel frowned. "I'm sorry, have we met?" She shook her head. "No." "Then how do you know me?" Instead of answering, she poured a cup of black coffee and placed it on the counter. "We've been waiting." Daniel felt an unexpected chill crawl across his back. Waiting? For him? He had never been here since he was 12 years old. How could anyone remember him after all these years? He looked around the room again. Every pair of eyes still followed him. Not hostile, not friendly, just patient, as though something important had finally begun. Point 2. Daniel wrapped both hands around the warm coffee mug, more to steady himself than to drink. The silence inside the diner felt unnatural. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of a small town. It was the silence of people holding their breath. "I'm looking for my aunt's house," he said. "Eleanor Harper." The waitress gave a slow nod. "I know. You know where it is?" "I know why you're here." Daniel frowned. "Actually, I don't think anyone does." She looked at him for a long moment before sliding an old brass key across the counter. "You'll need this." Daniel stared at it. "What is it?" "The front door key. Your aunt asked me to keep it until you came back." He picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy, engraved with a tiny symbol that looked like an eye surrounded by twisting branches. "My aunt left this with you 20 years ago." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. 20 years? She knew I'd come back. The waitress didn't answer directly. She said the house would call you when it was ready. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows. Daniel forced a small laugh. She always loved mysterious stories. The waitress didn't smile. "I'm not telling you a story." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "When you get there, don't open the attic door after midnight." Daniel blinked. "What? And if you hear someone knocking from inside the walls?" She paused. "Don't answer." A cold shiver ran down his spine. Before he could ask another question, the front door opened. A gust of icy wind swept through the diner. An elderly man stepped inside, his coat soaked from the rain. The moment he saw Daniel, his face turned pale. "So," he whispered, "it finally happened." He removed his hat and looked directly into Daniel's eyes. "You should leave while you still can." Daniel stood up. "Can someone please tell me what's going on?" No one replied. Instead, Every person in the diner slowly looked toward the dark forest beyond the rain-covered windows. Something about their expressions made Daniel's stomach tighten. It wasn't fear. It was acceptance, as if they had all known this day would come, and there was no stopping what would happen next. Daniel gripped the brass key in his pocket, walked back into the storm, and started his car. The old Harper house waited at the end of a lonely road deep inside the woods. And for the first time since returning to Blackridge, Daniel felt as though someone or something was waiting there for him. Point 3. The narrow road disappeared beneath a tunnel of towering pine trees. Rain tapped against the windshield as Daniel drove deeper into the forest, the headlights cutting through the darkness in pale yellow beams. The GPS had stopped working miles ago, but somehow he knew he was going the right way. Every turn felt strangely familiar, as if a forgotten part of his memory was guiding him home. After nearly 15 minutes, the trees opened to reveal a large Victorian house standing alone on a hill. Its windows were dark. Its white paint had faded to gray. The porch sagged with age, and thick ivy climbed across the stone walls like frozen fingers. Daniel turned off the engine. For a moment, the world became completely silent. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of insects, only the soft ticking of his cooling engine. He stepped out of the car and looked up at the house. A strange feeling settled over him. He had been here before, not just as a child. It felt as though the house itself remembered him. He climbed the creaking porch steps and slipped the old brass key into the lock. The door unlocked with a loud click. Before he could push it open, it slowly swung inward on its own. A wave of cold air drifted out. The entrance hall was covered in dust, yet everything was exactly where his aunt had left it. An old grandfather clock stood against the wall, frozen at 11:47. Family portraits hung in neat rows, their faded eyes seeming to follow him as he walked inside. He closed the door behind him. The sound echoed through the empty house. Then, thump! A single heavy footstep came from somewhere upstairs. Daniel froze. He listened. Nothing. It's just an old house, he whispered to himself. Trying to calm his nerves, he walked into the living room. A fireplace stood cold and empty. On the coffee table rested a neatly wrapped envelope with his name written across it. Daniel. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. If you're reading this, then the house has accepted your return. There are many things I never told you because you were too young to understand. Tonight, you must follow 3 rules. First, never answer a voice that calls your name after midnight. Second, never look through the attic keyhole. Third, if you hear 3 knocks on your bedroom door, pretend you're asleep. The letter ended with one final sentence. Some things in this house don't know that I'm gone. Daniel stared at the page, trying to convince himself it was one last joke from his aunt. Then, knock. A single knock echoed from somewhere upstairs. Daniel slowly looked toward the staircase. Someone, or something, was already awake. Point 4. Daniel remained perfectly still. The knock had been unmistakable. Not the groan of old wood. Not the rattle of loose pipes. A deliberate knock. Someone was upstairs. He checked the front door. It was still locked from the inside. Every window was covered in years of dust, untouched. No footprints marked the floor except his own. "Hello," he called, trying to keep his voice steady. No answer, only silence. He pulled the flashlight from his backpack and aimed it toward the staircase. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing portraits of long-dead family members lining the walls. Their painted eyes seemed almost alive in the flickering light. One step, then another. The wooden stairs creaked beneath his feet. As he reached the second floor, a cold draft brushed past him, carrying the faint scent of lavender, the same perfume his Aunt Eleanor had always worn. At the end of the hallway stood a single door. It was slightly open. The knock had come from inside. Daniel slowly pushed it wider. The room was untouched. A neatly made bed, an antique wardrobe, a rocking chair beside the window. No one. He let out a slow breath. "I'm imagining things," he whispered. Then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The rocking chair was moving, very gently, back and forth, back And fourth, there was no wind. The windows were closed. Daniel swept the flashlight across the room. Nothing. Just as he took a cautious step forward, the beam landed on an old mirror hanging above the fireplace. His own reflection stared back at him, but it wasn't alone. A dark figure stood behind him, tall, motionless, its face hidden in shadow. Daniel spun around instantly. No one. The room was empty. His heart pounded as he looked back at the mirror. The figure was gone. Shaking, he remembered the letter. Never look through the attic keyhole. He slowly lifted his eyes toward the ceiling. Above the hallway was a narrow staircase leading to the attic. At the top waited a weathered wooden door, and from the other side came 3 slow scratches, as though something inside had just realized. Daniel had come home. 5. Daniel stood frozen at the foot of the attic stairs. The scratching stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. He forced himself to look away from the attic door and returned to the bedroom, trying to think logically. Old houses settled. Wood expanded. Animals found their way into walls and attics all the time. There had to be a rational explanation. He repeated those words in his head until they almost sounded believable. Almost. He searched the room for anything that might explain his aunt's strange letter. Inside the antique wardrobe, he found neatly folded clothes, untouched for years. In the bottom drawer lay a small leather-bound journal. The cover was worn smooth with age. Inside, every page was filled with Eleanor's handwriting. The first entries described ordinary things, weather, grocery lists, visits from neighbors. Then the tone changed. October 12th. It walked through the hallway again last night. It didn't try my door. October 18th. I heard it call my name. The voice sounded exactly like my brother's, even though he died 30 years ago. October 22nd. It wants someone to open the attic door. It has become more patient than I expected. Daniel swallowed hard. He turned to the final page. There was only one sentence. If Daniel ever returns, tell him the house remembers what he forgot. A loud bang echoed from downstairs. Daniel jumped to his feet. The front door. Someone had entered the house. He grabbed the flashlight and hurried into the hallway. The house was silent again. Slowly, he descended the stairs. Halfway down, he noticed something impossible. The front door was still locked. No one could have come inside. Yet muddy footprints stretched across the wooden floor. They began at the front entrance and led deeper into the house. Daniel followed them with trembling hands. The footprints stopped outside a small door beneath the staircase. He had never noticed it before. A narrow storage room. The door stood slightly open. From inside came the faint sound of someone breathing. Slow, steady, waiting. Daniel tightened his grip on the flashlight. Very carefully, he pushed the door open. The tiny room was empty. No furniture, no boxes, only darkness. He swept the flashlight across the walls. Nothing. Then the beam reached the floor. Written in the dust, as though traced by a finger only moments earlier, were 4 words. I knew you'd return. Before Daniel could react, the storage room door slammed shut behind him.